Next example here, we'll see how the range selectors are a factor. So make another comp here. I'm going to call it text example 2. Same settings as before. Make a quick text layer. Now this time, when I open up the layer and go to my text group, and I'm going to choose which property I want to use to animate the individual letters onto the screen. So maybe I'll do a scale and rotation like I did in the last example here. So add a scale, and then within that same group, I'm going to click the add button and I'm going to add a rotation. Now the difference though, this time I'm not going to animate the scale and the rotation properties. I'm just going to set the starting values that I want the letters to have. Because keep in mind, right now, all the letters are going to be affected because all the letters are within the range selector, right? I haven't moved the range selector and I didn't have anything selected before I added the properties. So when I affect the scale here or the rotation, of course, all the letters are going to be affected. So I'll put the scale at 0. I'll put the rotation maybe at 2 revolutions. Again, not animating these properties because this time what I'm going to do is go to the range selector group and I'm going to animate the end point. If I want the letters, or excuse me, the start point, if I want the letters to animate on from left to right, I'm going to animate the start point. So I'll click the stopwatch for start, leaving the value at 0, and then I'll go a few seconds forward and bring the value here to 100. So the letters are basically revealed one at a time from left to right because they're being taken out of the range selector, right? And they're no longer being affected by these scale and rotation properties. Okay, so that's the basic idea there with animating the range selector. If you animate it, you can create animate in or animate out type of effects, which is really cool. Most of the text animation presets, which I've shown in a previous lesson, are just saved, text animators that were already created for you, which, if you create something cool that you want to save and be able to apply to another text layer later on, you basically just select all of it like that. And then you go to your animation menu and you choose Save Animation Preset. So all those text animation presets that are in that library are just, animations that were already created and saved for you. Okay, so that looks pretty cool, but a couple things that come up sometimes when you're doing these animate in and animate out type of things. Well, like I showed in the last example, these things are scaling and rotating from the bottom edge, so I might want to add an anchor point property to the group here and scrub the Y value. Although the problem with this though is because I'm animating the range selector, this anchor point will only be affecting the letters that aren't on the screen yet. So you know what? To get this to work, what I need to do is make a separate group with an anchor point property, and I need that group to be in front of this group, right? This one is the scale and rotation, so I'll give it a name. I'll hit return and call it scale and rotation. This one is going to be my anchor point, and I want it to be above the scale and rotation so that it's being affected, being calculated before. And then I can scrub that anchor point value. And see, now the letters are scaling, rotating from the center instead of from the bottom edge. And I'm not animating this range selector or anchor point, so it's just a constant. Okay, so that is how you can fix the anchor point issue. Just put an anchor point group ahead of your other animator group, and that will solve it. Okay, now another thing though that, when you're doing these type of animate in and animate out type of effects, is it's very sequential, right? The letters are going one after the other. And there may be cases where you want there to be some overlap in the animation. And that's a little bit more tricky. To do that, you have to go into your group that, has your animated range selector. And you're basically going to need to use the offset property here to offset things. Okay, that's one thing. And then in the advanced group, there's a bunch of settings that will have an effect on how it's animating. And here where it says shape, if we do ramp up or ramp down, that will give us some ease in or ease out to the movement. So see, now there's overlap, but see how it doesn't complete. So this is why we need the offset. So I would bring the time marker back to 0, hit the offset, and scrub the offset to where, in this case, minus 100, everything's gone. And then I'll move, to where my second range selector keyframe is and set another offset keyframe, in this case, putting it back to 0. And now you can see I've got some overlap with the letters, with the way the letters are animating. So it's not so sequential. It's not like one right after the other. There's overlapping action. So again, to do that, you have to do either a ramp up or ramp down, use your offset value in addition to the range selector start or end value to create the overlapping action. And there's other stuff you can experiment with here in this advanced group as well that will affect the way that it's in-betweening those keyframes. All right, one last example here with the animate in and animate out. Let's say I do another text layer and I want it to animate out. Let's see how that would differ. So I'll make another text layer, call it my title. And again, I open up the layer, go to the text group, choose what properties I want to add to the letters. In this case, I'm going to do opacity, and I'm going to put the opacity at 0. So all the letters are now 0 opacity because all the letters are within the range selector. In this case, I want it to animate off, not animate in. So I will bring the end point over to 0, set a keyframe where I want it to begin to animate away. And then I'll go a few seconds forward, bring the end point back over to 100. So what's happening here is basically the opposite. At the beginning, none of the letters are within the range selector because the start and end points are both at 0. And then one at a time, from left to right, the letters are being added to the group and receiving the 0% opacity. Now, I think to make this look a little cooler, I'm going to add another property too. I'm going to click the add pop-up. And one cool thing to point out here is it gives you a blur property. I'm going to add a blur property to that same group with a blur value of about 100. So now as the letters fade out, they're also going to blur out as well. And that creates a really cool effect. Now, one other tip I want to show when you're doing animate in and animate out kind of effects. By default, of course, it's doing it a letter at a time. But there are some situations where you may want it to animate in or animate out, not a letter at a time, but an entire word at a time. If you open up your advanced group, where it says based on, instead of characters, we can choose words or even entire lines if we were doing like paragraph text. So if I set it to words, you'll see the difference here. Now when it animates, instead of doing it a letter at a time, there we go, we get it a word at a time. Pretty cool. All right, hopefully this gives you some ideas for creating text animations, in particular doing animate in and animate out effects using the range selectors. In the next example, I will show how to do text on a path and text on shapes, which opens up a lot of possibilities for typographic design as well. All right, I'll pause for now though and see you in the next demonstration.